Hi, I'm Eugene, and today I'm going to share some really unexpected lessons and experiences I've had through my journey of meditating for 100 hours over 10 days. And I'm hoping y'all can get some value out of it today as well and some insight. So, a little less than 2 months ago, I had the opportunity to go. I was out in the desert in California where the center is. And there's the ground rules for those 10 days: no talking, no books. You couldn't even journal, no phones, no computers. During break time, there's pretty much nothing to do. You're kind of twiddling your thumbs. This is what my room looked like. Little bed, tiny room. This is what my schedule looked like. For those of you who can't see it, it's basically 4 o'clock, wake up, 4:30, meditate, 6:30, breakfast, 8 o'clock, meditate some more, 11 o'clock, lunch, 1 o'clock, meditate until 5 o'clock, tea break because they didn't give you dinner, and 6 o'clock, meditate some more. 7 o'clock, they played a recording of some teachings. And then 8:15, guess what happened? You meditate, right? And then 9 o'clock, take rest for the night. 10 o'clock, lights out, rinse and repeat. So when I got back from this, one of the top curiosity I was noticing in people's faces is why would I do this? Right. And I'd be sharing this with people. They're like, conversation kind of went like, oh, how you doing? What's been going on for you? I'm like, oh, I just got back from a meditation retreat. I meditated over 100 hours in 10 days. And you notice they're so uncomfortable, like their face drops, and you even see their body language kind of like backing away from me as if I just told them I'm a cannibal, right? So the thought for them felt so uncomfortable. So I have to give a little bit of context to why I did this. So hopefully it'll make sense. So here's a picture of me in 5th grade in my yearbook. And we did a thought exercise where the assignment was 15 years from now, I will be, and you had to complete the sentence. My answer was looking for a good job. This is because I didn't come from money. I grew up extremely poor, came from a broken family. And that's exactly what I did. I became a pharmacist right out of graduation, 6-figure salary right out the bat. And yet I was still extremely depressed, a lot of anxiety, a lot of stress. So after 3 years, I decided to quit. Me and my wife packed up our bags, went on a cross-country road trip for 2 months, had the time of our life. It was so amazing. And turns out hell is in Michigan. It's a city in Michigan. So sorry, Ryan and whoever else is in Michigan. Um, so I moved to LA to become a filmmaker. And I was making videos and with a group of passionate filmmakers. And this is where I got my marketing experience, actually. We put film after film out, and multiple films reached millions and millions of views. I think the largest one that we did got 24 plus million views on it. So it taught me a lot indirectly about how do you take an idea and get it shared. And I was learning so much about this. And we were living the life, a group of passionate filmmakers. But I ran out of money. And I was the only married one. So I went back to work as a pharmacist, tail between my legs, really discouraged. And one of the things that sometimes happens, when you're married, little children pop out. So there's my first. And then one became two. And then two became three. So here's the three of them together. And when my second one came out, by then, I was already promoted. I was a supervisor for LA County, managing over 6 major hospitals and 250 plus clinics in the IT department. And I was leading a lot of projects there. And I just remember sitting in my desk in my cushy job one day, and I just felt so dissatisfied. And I remember thinking to myself, now that I'm a parent, I don't want to be that dad that tells their kid how to live their life with my words. I wanted to be the dad that can show how to live life through the life that I live without having to tell them. So I decided to invest in myself again, give this find your purpose, find your passion thing a try. And I coughed up over $20,000 for a business coach, and I hired a business coach. And I started writing, blogging, and I started getting attention. In a little less than a year, I got maybe close to 1 million views that year. And influencers like Guy Kawasaki was sharing my article. So that was really cool. And it caught the attention of the CEO of the company that was coaching me. And they offered me a job. And the CEO offered to mentor me. And that's what happened. His name's Danny Inney. He's famous in the online course building space. And it was such a great opportunity because when else do you get to get mentored by someone that runs a multi-million dollar business? So I just learned by doing. I started coaching. He gave me dozens and dozens of clients to coach their businesses, and it started working. You see results in their businesses. They're growing. I'm like, oh my gosh, this stuff works. Revenue records were broken. Side hustles became full-time hustles. And as I was working with him, I continued to work on my personal coaching business. And one year, an article I wrote got 7 million views on it. So it went viral. And that helped me launch my business. I made in a week what they were paying me in a year. So that's when my wife was just like, what would it look like, if you did your thing full time? So that's what I did. I started running events and workshops and I went full time. I've been fortunate enough to be featured in a lot of platforms. That was really cool. Built up quite the resume. The irony is, even though I was getting to experience all these things, I still didn't feel successful. And I had this huge breakthrough on my brand at that point. I realized I had no idea how saturated the coaching space is. Super, super saturated. And so I realized one of the ways I can differentiate myself is because of my healthcare background. I have a doctorate. So I started focusing more on the science behind personal development. And I talk a lot about neuroscience and the brain because it's the most powerful piece of technology that we all have access to. The problem is, it's not like you're born out of the womb with some manual that says, here's how you maximize your performance, right? So that's kind of what I started teaching. And I was leaning into more and more. And then I'm having all these aha moments as I'm diving deep into the neuroscience, right? Turns out this is why a lot of times we experience all the mental exhaustion, the brain fog, difficulty coming up with good ideas, not seeing the business results, etc. And I realized it's because there's only two states that your brain's ever in. Turns out that's what the science shows. And it's in what's either called a survival state or an executive state, okay? The only thing we need to know about this right now, survival state, what is it? It's a state where you feel endangered, where you feel threatened. And your brain goes into a reactive mode. You literally can't think. You have to react without thinking. Think about a tiger in front of you about to eat you. You start thinking, you might die. So you can't think. Executive state. This is where a lot of your amazing capabilities come from. Your creativity, your empathy, your intuition, your critical thinking skills, and the list goes on and on. So what I learned after that was, wait, hold on, you can't be in both states at the same time. It's only one or the other. It's that simple. It really is. And being in survival is the only reason we're not able to produce our best results, because your critical thinking skills aren't on, your empathy is not on, right? Your problem solving skills aren't on. And then I got shocked because it turns out the research shows we're in survival for about 70% of our adult lives. Not because your actual life is in physical danger where you're running away from a tiger, it's because of emotional stress. Think about how often we feel stressed, right? Anxious, frustrated, depressed, and your brain literally responds to it as if your life is in danger. Why? Because research shows that emotional pain can be just as painful as physical pain. So I'm sitting here going, wait, hold on. If that's the case, how do we survive? What does this actually look like? Because we're not always surviving running away from these crazy animals that are trying to eat us. It only knows how to do one of three things. It's called the fight, flight, freeze response. Very obvious in the wild. If you have an actual physical life-threatening scenario, you're going to pick up a weapon to try to fight. You're going to run for your life in flight, or you're going to play dead and freeze. Possums are famous for doing this because their predators like their food alive, and that's how they survive. Now, the thing I'm looking at this, I'm like, oh my gosh, wait, hold on. Then what does emotional survival look like? And I'm going down this rabbit hole. I'm like, oh, fight response looks like things like being defensive in an argument, or road rage because my ego got hurt and I'm trying to fight that back and cut that person back off without any consideration of the cars around me. Physical altercations, that's a literal fight. What does flight look like? It's when we procrastinate. It's because the thing that I need to do right now, I avoid doing it. I flee from doing it because of some concern. What if I do this, I look stupid? What if I do this and I don't get it right? What if I do this and I get judged? Literal avoidance of people. If you have an ex-partner that you didn't get along with and ended on bad terms, you see them walking down the street, you're going to literally walk away, right? That's a literal flight. And then there's freeze. This is kind of like when you get caught in a lie, which is really funny because it's your brain going, like, pretend to not be alive right now. And maybe this person will stop interrogating you. But the irony is you clearly look guilty when you're doing that. Or overwhelm. That's when we freeze and we stop making decisions. So I'm going down deeper this rabbit hole. I'm having this experience where it feels like, oh my gosh, like I just stepped out of the matrix. Because I'm starting to notice more. There's subtle fight, flight, freeze responses. What are the subtle ones? The fight mode, the need to be right. Need for control, the need to show off. Hustle culture, the need to prove yourself. Perfectionism. People pleasing is a fight response. And I'm going into all of this, I had this, and I realized as a business owner, a lot of business owners have this fight mode, okay? And I had this client once in his 60s, and he had everything you can imagine, multi-million-dollar business, beautiful home, beautiful family. And he's like, why am I in my 60s and I'm still experiencing so much anxiety and stress? And we're talking about the fight response, and he has this aha moment. I've been fighting my whole life to prove to the world that I'm better than my older brother. And I was like, what are you talking about? My older brother was an NFL football player. And when I was in high school, my high school coach told me I'm never going to be as good as him. So stop trying. So we spend our whole life fighting, trying to accomplish more, thinking that it will make us feel more successful. But it always leads to burnout, and it always leads to a lack of fulfillment. I can bet my life on this now. And because you're not thinking, remember you're in survival, this is why we work harder, not smarter. We develop a lot of blind spots. You develop tunnel vision. If a tiger walks into the room, you're not going to look anywhere else except where that tiger is. So you're missing out on all the opportunities and solutions around you. And then flight response is when we start numbing ourselves without realizing. There's no judgment around any of this. We all have our numbing behavior. Some people like to eat a tub of ice cream. Some people overindulge in things like food, alcohol, sex to the point of addiction. And this is just for awareness purposes. No need to judge it because judging is a fight response, by the way. Freeze. It's when trauma happens. It's when you go into shock, tragedy, trauma, disbelief, disassociation. So I'm going down this rabbit hole and this matrix, kind of exiting the matrix experience. I'm going, oh my God, this is everywhere inside of me, inside of everyone around me. So what are we supposed to do? And I'm reflecting, what are my own fight, flight, freeze responses? And I hit another wall. I think we can all relate. You ever have this experience, you know what's good for you, but because you don't feel like it, you don't do it? I know I'm supposed to go to the gym to feel healthier, but I don't feel like it, so I'll stay home. So I'm like, why does this happen? Turns out by the time you're 35 years old, 90 to 95% of your brain runs on subconscious programming. It's on autopilot. It does it without you having to tell it to do it, just like a habit. So just like a computer can be programmed to do the same thing every day, that's what happens in our brains. You make 30,000 decisions a day. 90% of those decisions are on autopilot. Same decisions. You do it without thinking. 70,000 thoughts is the amount of thoughts you think per day. 90 to 95% of those thoughts are the same thoughts as the day before. And a lot of those thoughts are negative thoughts about yourself. What state does your brain go into when it thinks negative thoughts? It's going to go into a state of survival because it's uncomfortable. So here's my confession. As business was growing, the highs felt really high, but the lows felt really low. It felt even lower than I've experienced before. So even after I was so fortunate to experience all these amazing successes in my life, that little bit of sadness, that little bit of depression, that little bit of anxiety, it would keep hanging out with me. And I knew it was there, but I just wouldn't admit it to myself. So even after all the work I did on myself, I'm like teaching all this stuff, it was still there. And then I started thinking about this. You know, when you start growing, when you're in your personal growth journey, everything will get amplified. I'll give you an example. What do you think will happen if you give a drug addict $1 million? What is he likely to spend it on? Probably more drugs. It's just a tool reflecting its owner. It's the same with our businesses. As our businesses grow, everything's going to get amplified. If you're a control freak, that's going to get amplified. If you're insecure, that's going to get amplified. So I'm sitting here going, wow, if things keep growing, what's going to get amplified in me? And I knew I needed to go deeper. That's why I did this. 100 hours over 10 days. I'm going to go through each day to show you what happened. Day one, withdrawal was happening. Oh my gosh. I think the best way to describe it is it felt like going through drug rehab is what I would imagine it felt like. Because I was going through so much withdrawal, I started becoming so aware of all the things I'm addicted to. Thinking about work, thinking about challenges, right? Time was a big thing I realized I was addicted to. Has it been an hour yet? Has it been an hour yet? Is this over? When is this going to be over? Oh my gosh, how many more hours am I going to do this? Time, think about time. And the thing is, I meditate quite a bit. But at the end of this day, on day one, I'm sitting there going, I don't know, I'm going to do 9 hours of this. Because you know what it was like? Has anyone seen Karate Kid? There's a famous scene where Daniel, the main character, wants to learn karate. And Mr. Miyagi is like, okay, here, you're going to wax this car. You're going to do wax on, wax off. And you're going to do that all day. That's what it felt like. Because what we're supposed to do is we're sitting there with our eyes closed, cross-legged. And the focus is you have to pay attention to your nose and pay attention to your breath going in and breath going out and notice the sensations. And if your thought drifts away, bring your attention back to the nose. I did that for 10 plus hours on day. So day two, progress. It actually started feeling better. I started getting the hang of it because it was interesting. I'm like, oh, I start feeling the hair on my nostrils moving when I'm breathing in and out. Oh, cool. I'm noticing the air is colder when it goes in, but it's slightly warmer when it comes out. And I'm having these aha moments. I realized one of my triggers in that moment, for example, is when people don't listen to me, it's a big trigger for me, especially with my kids. Because I remembered memories in the past when my single mother would come home from a long day of work. She had a list of things for me to do, and I would do them, even though I was juggling multiple jobs and trying to get by in school. But when I asked her for something, she was too tired to do it, or she would forget, and that hurt even more. Because in my mind, it's you're not listening to me because I don't matter. I do all these things for you, but why don't you do it for me? So when my kids don't listen to me, what am I remembering? You're not listening to me because I don't matter. And that was a big one for me that I get a little emotional about. Day 3 was misery. um, we're instructed. You get kind of excited because the instructor is like, we're going to do something new today. I'm like, finally, we've been just focusing on our nose for 2 days. And you go, now you're going to focus on the triangular area of your nose. So all you're doing is just adding a little bit of area here to pay attention to while you're meditating. And I was just like, are you kidding me? But it was cool because you did start to eventually feel it. Day 4 was the real work. Day 1 through 3 was just prep, it turned out. So day 4, they're like, this is the real meditation. The technique is called Vipassana meditation. And the work of this meditation is to focus on the sensations that you have in your body. Okay, one by one, specifically. So we did that all day. And then day 5 comes along. And it's interesting because I'm starting to notice sensations in different part of my body. So I've done plenty of meditations like this in the past, and always above my neck, I was able to feel it like very strongly. So for example, if I'm focusing on my lips, I would feel it tingling and like there's like a strong pressure on it and my forehead. But neck down, it was always inconsistent. But now I'm like, I was able to do it at will. I want to feel my shoulder. I start feeling sensations in my shoulder and so on. So there was progress in day 5. Day 6, back to misery. I was really struggling with the repetitiveness of each day. And I thought I was doing better and better, but then I'm noticing my addictions coming back in, especially my addiction to time. It was funny because I remember I'm sitting at lunch and I'm rushing to eat. I'm like scarfing down my meal because in my mind it's like, hurry, you got to finish your food so you can make it in time for your 20-minute walk. And then you can make it in time for your 1-hour nap. And I'm sitting there, go, why am I in such a rush? Like there's nothing to rush about. Like, why am I not appreciating the current moment and just enjoying my time here in this beautiful area? And that was kicking in. Day 7, it started feeling really good. Contentment came in. So this was interesting because by this day, I was actually feeling like, you know what? I got what I'm looking for out of this. If I went home today, I would actually be happy about this. And looking back on this day, this was a pivotal moment. Here's why. So the teachings come from Buddha. And one of the things that Buddha teaches is in order to get to enlightenment, you have to get yourself to a place where you're no longer craving anything, but you are also not in aversion. You're not avoiding things either. Okay. Because what happens is when we're craving something, I really want this, whether it's my business, my life, my personal life, my relationships, you're actually not happy in that moment. And you will go into a fight mode, survival fight mode, to fight to make that happen. Okay. And when we're uncomfortable or when we're hurting, we're going to go into aversion. Or in my language, you're going to go into a flight mode or a freeze mode and avoid it. And this is in biblical scripture too, right? One of the famous verses, Psalms 23, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. Is this making sense? So because if I was honest, up till this point, if I was being honest, there's a deep part of me. I'm like, I really wish I get some crazy breakthrough while I'm here. You're craving it so bad. And I'm sitting there, but this is the moment where I'm just like, no, I'm good. And I actually meant it. And that's when what I'm about to share with you that happened started happening. And it didn't happen before until this moment, okay? So day 8, curiosity. So I'm still here, so might as well, right? Keep going, 3 more days. So one of the things the instructor kept saying was if you ever notice these intensified, solidified sensations in your body, just pay attention to it, observe it. Don't react to it, even though it's intense. So you have to understand, we're sitting cross-legged on the floor for 10 plus hours a day. So what I thought he was talking about was, oh, my knees are hurting like crazy. It's so uncomfortable. Maybe he's talking about pay attention to these sensations. My back is aching. Okay, I'll focus on my back a little bit. So that's what I did that day. Day 9, new experiences. So first thing in the morning, I sit down for my meditation. And then all of a sudden, I'm noticing all of these really different new sensations in my body. And the best way I can describe it is it felt like there was a glass shard stabbing my neck here. It felt like these 2 intense like balls of heavy energy was tight in my chest. Felt like something thin was slicing through my torso and my arms. And I'm going, what is this? And you're just supposed to sit there and observe it. And they would come and go. Every meditation that day was a new experience, some new sensation. So it turns out up till that point because your pain tolerance, your physical pain tolerance has increased because you're dealing with all the discomfort in your knees and your back. Your emotional pain tolerance has increased. So because of that, I was experiencing physical manifestations of emotional pain that has always been inside of me that I was never paying attention to because we tend to focus on the outside world so much and not the inside world. I had my eyes closed more than it was open each day. So it was really intense and new for me. And I'm just sitting there. So day 10, I think the best way I can describe this is it felt like there was surgery being performed on my soul. And I was so encouraged because, oh my gosh, like this is not some rocket science technique. You just needed to put in the time and the effort and the work. I could bring this home. I could do this at home and get operated on whenever I want. And that day you break your vow of silence, you can talk to each other. All I wanted to do was just go back to my room and meditate because I was just so inspired. So when we ended, I'm on my drive home and I'm finally processing because up till this point, it felt like work. And I'm bawling for 2 hours. Because, one second. I grew up in stereotypical franchise Christian setting. And one of the things Christian settings do is they'll do these retreats. And, you're up late all the time with your friends and you're delirious. And what they'll usually do on the final day is something called an altar call, where they're inviting you to surrender your life to God, to Christ. And, by then you're so delirious, tired, and you're thinking about the pain you're having in your life. So you're all weeping and crying, and then you're going with the flow with everyone. But I never felt like a full experience of that. Like it felt like I was just going with the flow. It wasn't like you know what I mean? Like, and then it feels cathartic. You go back home, you go back to your life. And it took the concept of surrender to a different level for me. You see, I was the type that always took things into my own hands because I grew up really poor, came from a broken family. I was harboring a lot of resentment and anger throughout my life. And all I needed to do was just be aware of what was inside that I was not aware of. I didn't need to do anything about it. And the pain was working itself out. And I'm going to explain why in a little bit, the science behind that. And this was so humbling for me. It's something I could not control. I just needed to be present. So here's 3 big lessons I learned. Lesson number 1, increase my pain tolerance. Bruce Lee once said, do not pray for an easy life. Pray for the strength to endure a difficult one. And you see, that reason for this is over those 10 days, I was increasing my pain tolerance. We all have the capability to do this. Because once you start increasing your pain tolerance, imagine you're also able to increase your emotional pain tolerance. Imagine what it would look like if we start developing skills, not just us, but our children's generation, to be able to hold a trauma and not react to it and allow themselves to process it and heal from it. There's this book called Altered Traits. I'd recommend it to anyone if they're interested in the science behind meditation, as that's what it's about, all the benefits. And one of those people, Dan Goleman, I believe it was him, he shared his own experience about going into these meditation retreats. And he was sharing this experience where his knee was in such excruciating pain, but he kept bearing through it. And at one point, boom, you're at peace. You still feel the discomfort, but it's no longer as painful because you are now observing the pain instead of reacting to it. Okay? And this happened to me prior to this retreat. I practiced doing that to the point where the pain just went away. I was amazed by that. Like it was hurting really bad. So they do science around this. They brought in these Tibetan monks and flew them into a university, and they tested 2 groups, the monks and a group of people that never meditated a day in their life. And you know what they did? They would shock them with electricity to a painful level. And the group that never meditated, predictable response, like, this hurts. Stop, stop, stop. They're shocking the Tibetan monks, but they're not flinching a muscle. So then the researchers sitting there going, hold on, is it because they're not feeling the pain? They must not be feeling the pain. They're looking at the brain scans because they had brain scans tied to both groups. They're like, no, they're feeling this. It's showing that they're really feeling the pain. They've just trained their minds to the point they don't have to react to it. They got so good at doing it. So we can all do this. The science proves it. And the way I explain it is if you've ever seen those horror movies where there's a fake scare scene, right? The bushes are rustling, the music's getting intense, and then out pops the cute little bunny. If we just train ourselves to look long enough, it won't be that bad, right? It's the same with our emotional discomfort. If we're able to hold our pain, our anxiousness, our stress, and just hold on to it long enough, out pops the person that's really hurting. It's usually a younger version, like a 5-year-old self that attached to meaning to some experience, or a 10-year-old self, or a young adult self. So when you train yourself to do this, over time you get better. If you watch a deer get chased by a tiger and it outruns the tiger, and you watch what that deer does in the wild, you know what it does? When it outruns the tiger, it literally shakes off the experience and moves on with its day as if nothing happened, even though it almost just died. Humans don't do that. They keep thinking things over and over again. So the biology of our bodies, you can get out of a survival state in as little as 90 seconds. We can train ourselves to do this. And that's what's fascinating. All it takes is just starting little by little. Try to see if you can just spend an extra minute, an extra 2 minutes when you're feeling stressed. Lesson number 2, time management is pain management. I love this phrase. I got it from a fellow, his name's Nir Eyal. He wrote a book called Indistractable. You see, the moment you process your pain that's been there for a long time on autopilot in your nervous system, your productivity goes through the roof. Okay? This is simply because you just stop reacting to things and you start going into creation mode. You're creating the life you want versus reacting to things. And everyone's experienced flow state here, right? Everyone's heard of flow state where you're just in the zone and you're loving it. You know, I was having a lot of trouble being present with my kids. Because, entrepreneurial life, there's a lot on the line. It feels like, right? And I'm sitting there thinking why can't I slow down time with my kids and have more of these precious moments where you would never be anywhere else except just with the person in front of you. And you guys can see I'm still processing, right? And I'm realizing we get so stressed and afraid that when we're doing that, we move to the future and think about the future, thinking, I want that thing. Or we're regretting the past because what we have right now, I don't want to be here because what's here is my stress. What's here is my anxiety. What's here is my pain, and I don't want to be with it. And that's what's preventing us from being present with those that we love. And you know what happens? This is why part of the reason why time keeps going by faster. I'm when did you get so big? Because it's hard being present. When you get better at becoming more aware of your deeper emotional pains, time will have less and less control over you. You get so present, you go into flow, you lose yourself. You don't exist anymore. When you're fully empathetic, you're not paying attention to yourself. Your executive state turns on. Lesson number 3, surrender control to work smarter. You know, as you start developing the courage and the resilience to become more present, you get better and better at being with your pain and accepting it the way it is. It is what it is. It's there for a reason. And that's when operations start happening inside of you. That's when the operation occurs, when you can be present with it. Because you're tapping into a deeper part of yourself and you teach yourself not to react to it and just be with it. How do we react to it? We fight to get rid of it. Oh, maybe I need to work harder, work more. Or we avoid it. I'm going to watch Netflix or, eat a tub of ice cream or whatever it is. But look at this for a second with me. If you pay attention to your body, if you teach yourself to be present, when you're relaxed, what do you think your body's doing? Something called your parasympathetic nervous system turns on. It's what's called a rest and digest state. When we're stressed because your body literally thinks it's going to die, there's a lot of things happening. Your heart's beating 100 miles per minute. You're breathing in a ton of air to try to get oxygen through your system. Your digestive system slows down because it's not a time to be eating when you're about to die. This is why a lot of stressed people have digestion issues, by the way. You're wasting so much energy, then you're conserving it. This is why it's hard to heal when you're stressed out. So your body naturally moves towards what's called homeostasis, balance. Just let your body do its job. But we're getting in the way of that. We get in our own way. And then I'm wait, hold on. What if what your emotions are? It's your mind's way of trying to show you what's getting in the way of balance so that when you pay attention to it, your mind will help you get your mind back in balance. So if we can let our mind and our body just do its job, you're going to perform a lot better. I'm willing to bet my life on this now. I've seen it firsthand so many times. So this is why it's actually very important to actually schedule white space in your calendar. White space, just to be with you and present. And you lose, it's the art of losing yourself. Flow state is when you lose yourself. You're empathetic. Your creativity's on because you're not paying attention to yourself. You're not focused on yourself, right? You lose track of time. You lose track of your body. You lose track of your environment. Empathy's turned on. It's a beautiful state to be in. And your critical thinking centers turn on. So I want to close with a picture of this. It's Death Valley. Okay. It's one of the driest areas in North America, and it's called Death Valley because nothing grows on Death Valley. It's very dry and very hot. But in 2005, it received 6.5 inches of rain, and something freaking amazing happened. You could not see the floor of Death Valley anymore. It was covered in flowers. I got this from Sir Ken Robinson, who's an amazing educator. And he brought up an important point. What if Death Valley wasn't dead? It was just dormant. It just needed the right environment to let its potential flourish. So I started asking and questioning, oh, your environment does matter. This is behavioral science now. If Linda was here, she can advocate for me. What would having more of the right environment look like in your life? Surrounding myself with people who inspire me to grow has been so pivotal. It's been so great. And I have so much gratitude for that. You know, it's sad because they've done a study once where they asked a simple question, who's got your back? With a group of people. 55% said nobody. 60% of those people who said nobody, they were married. Harvard Business Review came out with an article talking about burnout. It actually isn't as much as it is about exhaustion, as much as it is about how lonely they felt. You know, you could have two companies, company A, company B, same amount of workload. One company's reporting burnout while the other one's thriving. Why? The one that's thriving felt supported by their peers, by their managers, by their leaders, versus the other one, they're getting hounded on and yelled at and putting pressure on them. How lonely you feel directly correlates with how burnt out you get. So here's the plot twist. I realized loneliness isn't just because of the lack of authentic interaction with the world outside of me and the people outside of me. It also has to do with how little authentic interaction there's going on inside of me. This was the big breakthrough for me. Because if I don't spend time within myself, I will continue to have transactional relationships where I use other people instead of authentically connecting with them. Sorry. My wife and kids, I use them selfishly quite a lot after I'm reflecting on all this. And I knew this, right? But it hit my heart so deep after this retreat because I have a limiting belief that I don't matter, right? Broken home. Parents were never home. So how did I use my wife and kids? I would do so many nice things for them, claiming it's because I love you so much. This is why I do it for you. I wasn't doing it for them. Subconsciously, it was maybe if you fight and do these nice things for them, maybe they will, in exchange, help you feel like you matter. How do I know this is true? I think a lot of us can relate to this. When I'm in arguments, what's the defense I use? Well, I did this and this for you. Why don't you do that and that for me? It was transactional. It wasn't from a place of true generosity. Why would I keep track of those things? Unless it was truly from a place of abundance and love. And I don't want to be that person anymore. And I realize I can only love others as much as I love myself. I can only be accepting of other people as much as I am accepting of my own self. And I was done being that person that didn't do that. You know, I had a client once, in second grade, mom was kicking dad out of the house because dad was cheating multiple times. And he became that boy that was at sports, be at the baseball game, look at the bleachers, looking for his dad, and dad was never there. And eventually he started working for dad's company and got involved there. And I'm having a conversation with him because he hired me to coach him. And he's bringing up his dad. He's going, you know, my dad's not getting any younger. He's approaching his later years in life. And I curiously asked him, well, what's concerning you about this? And he said, well, you know, he might pass away soon. And I explored further. What's concerning you about that? And as we explored, what we discovered was that little version of him, the memory he has when he was a kid looking at the bleachers and dad was never present in his life. To that kid, it was terrifying. Why? Because the moment dad dies, it's set in stone. I do not have the dad I've been looking for. And we're exploring this because he did something so beautiful that I invited him to do. We explored, well, you're an adult now. You can be that dad for yourself you never had, if you choose to do so. It's your decision. And he said, yes, I'm going to be that dad for myself. What does it mean? If that little kid liked playing a certain video game, maybe 10 minutes a week or whatever, play that video game as a way of bonding with that little kid inside of you. If you got in trouble one time for drawing on the wall, go to a wall and doodle in your house somewhere and show yourself that it's not that bad, not that big of a deal. How will you be the type of parent for yourself you've never had? I had this fortunate opportunity to get invited for a television special taping for Dr. Amen. He's a psychiatrist. He's a double board certified child and adult psychiatrist. And he brought up this concept because he had a lot of trouble in the past with this one child. And he brought up the concept of something he called special time. Special time where he spent 20 minutes a day with his child, no expectations, no judgment, no criticism. And he said, when my child would play a board game with me, if he started cheating, I just cheated too. I just made an observation. Oh, I noticed you changed the rules here. Because it's his way of showing, look, here's proof that I love you unconditionally. No matter what you do, I still love you. This is why I spent the 100+ hours meditating for those 10 days. I wanted to put in the time to being that person for me. I knew deep down there was a part of me that really needed me to listen to me. So whenever I'm uncomfortable, you know how I treat myself? You know how much stuff I got? I'm busy. That's fight mode. I got work to do. Leave me alone. Or I'd run away from myself. Oh, I'd rather watch Netflix. This new show that came out looks really good. Right? Or I'll just freeze and disassociate. And I know he needed that time with me. No judgment, no reaction, no criticism. Just be together with him. You know, I used to have a ton of imposter syndrome as a new coach. Because I had this belief that, if I'm a coach, I should never be experiencing, anxiety, stress, frustration. And I realized this was the key. It's not about you not experiencing anxiety, frustration, and stress. It's about how good you are at being present with it. Because remember, in 90 seconds, you can get yourself out of it. It's about how present you are to yourself and being accepting of it. So will you be the type of parent you always needed, but you might have not had? Because you know what happens otherwise? We treat our kids differently, saying this is how my parent treated me. I don't want to do it to my kid. But we're not considering what does my kid actually need right now. And this was the most important decision that you can make. So I want to just pause real quick. If you invite everyone, make that decision for yourself. Do you want to be that adult for yourself that you always needed? So when you do this, not only do your critical thinking centers, your creativity and your empathy all go back on, we're able to get out of consumption mode. That's what we do in survival. We're consuming so much. I need another course. I need another book. I need another whatever. But you go into creating mode and you're creating the value that only you can create. Okay? So we all fear change to a degree. But the truth is everything is changing. You get 100,000 new heartbeats every day. You get 2 million new liters of air that you're breathing in per day. 25 million cells is replacing itself every single second. There's another 25 million. These lights, it's not a new light. It's not an old light, the same light. It's a new light every single second. That's why we get an electricity bill at the end of the month. So to prevent yourself from changing is actually a choice that we make out of fear. So everything is changing. So the question is, will you? Thank you.